The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
We are back. Insight Pitch with Skip Lockwood. I'm Ralph Tyko with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, and I have the honor of speaking with Skip on a weekly basis, and this week is no exception. Skip Lockwood, how are you, sir?
I am doing wonderful. I am doing great. Looking forward next week to going out to Cooperstown. I've been invited to present in the great book series that they have. Athletes, baseball players go out and present books that they have written. They've invited me to go out there. I'm privileged to be able to go out. I have not seen Cooperstown in a long, long time. I'm really looking
Well,
forward
I'll
to
tell you
going
what,
out there.
you are to be honored for this. I happen to know Bruce Markston, and he chooses his speakers and the authors that he has come up there very carefully. So your book is obviously impressed him. It's going great guns on Amazon. And
yeah, it's doing well. It is doing well.
Real nice.
Got very nice reviews, which I am very proud of.
The book is so readable for a baseball fan. It's not the kind of book that, because you do offer intellectual material on transcending your baseball skills to real life, if you will, the civilian world. But you don't come off as being hoity-toity. And it would be almost expected, if you would. You're a man of letters. You're degreed. Two of the most influential universities in the country, Columbia University, the great school in New York, my hometown, and then MIT. How did you go from Columbia to MIT, which I would have thought of as an engineering school?
MIT is very diverse. I was at Columbia during the last couple of years I was with New York. And I had completed a master's at Fairfield University in speech, and I was very interested in the meaning of words and how sentences become understood, the linguistics of how things fit together. And a dear friend, a Jesuit priest that taught at Fairfield, Father Bernice Scully, suggested that Columbia had a program, a doctoral program, an EDD program, so that would be a teaching program, not a clinical program, in sports psychology. And he said, although it didn't match all that well with what I had just completed, it was interesting. And so I went there and I met with the dean. He was very, very encouraging for me to apply. I had to take the graduate records, the GREs, which I did. I did okay on those, and I made the application, and I got accepted into the doctoral program in sports psychology. And I went there, I think it was 2 years, the last 2 years in New York. What a beautiful place to go to Columbia on the west side, upper west side. And
yes.
For me, coming from Connecticut, it wasn't as far as I thought it was going to be. I was very blessed to be in that program. But then I left New York, as you know, and I went to Boston. And so it was just, we had sold the house in Connecticut, and it was just too far to go and too much. So I was looking around for a program that I could, do that was close to home, maybe BC or someplace like that. And they really didn't have a sports psychology program. So I went to a friend of mine that was practicing in a clinical psychology practice, and he said, well, why don't you join us, and you can practice some psychology and we'll teach you. You don't need a PhD. The master's is good enough if you have supervision. So I said, all right, okay. So I did, and I was in the clinical practice with him. Great guy. I'm still very funny in close contact with him. His name is Harvey Dahlberg, Dr. Harvey Dahlberg. And so we went to work together. But we didn't have any sports people coming in, and I wasn't very suited for the kind of stuff that I was seeing and problems that I was having to deal with every day. So I said, oh, man, this is not going to be a lifetime vocation for me. I've got to do something different. And I interviewed at Harvard Business School. I interviewed at MIT in the business school. Got accepted to both, at least in a handshake. Decided MIT was a more nurturing program. The program I was accepted to was called the Sloan Fellows, which was an honor to be accepted into Sloan Fellows. Very exclusive, elite club of very gifted mid-career executives coming to a program to get their MBA. And I went through that program as often people do. Your eyes are wide open, your heart's beating fast, you're trying to understand all the different language and the different ways of talking about everything, really. And it was great to be there. I learned an awful lot. Still have close friends from the class, which is class of '84. We're still very much in contact. These are world business people living in all parts of the world in the country that have gone on to do great things in their companies. And some have done have enormous accomplishments. So it was quite a program. I was lucky to get in, and I worked my butt off to graduate. It was hard work.
Okay, you know what comes to mind for me when we talk about your academic endeavors and skills is the story of Dr. Bobby Brown, who later became the president of the American League, but he was a third baseman with the Yankees in the late 40s and early 50s. And he later became a cardiologist, and he was studying for med school when he was playing with the Yankees, and he happened to be roomed with Yogi Berra, who I want to talk to you about because we talked about him a little bit off air, your first day with the Mets. But Yogi Berra and Dr. Brown are roomies on the road, and they're reading their respective reading material. Dr. Brown is reading the famous medical book, and
Grey's Anatomy.
Grey's Anatomy, absolutely.
Yeah.
And Yogi is reading a comic book. And it's time to shut it down, close the lights. And Yogi gets up to close the lights, and he looks at Dr. Brown and says, how'd yours turn out? The book. Yeah. So my point is, all through your career, you were just dealing with, as roommates, as friends, as teammates, the average ball player. The average ball player doesn't seem to have, the way I've noted it through the years, doesn't seem to have your intellect, your curiosity, your abilities to learn and what have you. Did it get, not just in the majors, in the minors, the bus rides, being on the road 6 months a year, did it get incredibly boring for you at times?
Well, that was one of the reasons I set upon trying to get, my degree and other things that I was determined to to be a professional when my career ended. I did not want to have a lunch bucket. I wanted to have a second career. I was enamored with Jim Lonborg, who went to med school and started with med school and completed it after his career was over in dentistry. My roommate that I had in Milwaukee got his PhD. His name was Dave Baldwin. He was a geneticist and got his PhD. I was always, mesmerized by guys that were Renaissance man's not the right word, but that they have another interest, they have another focus. And I don't think it hurt my baseball career to be reading and studying and thirsty for other kinds of information. You said I was curious. I was always very curious about our culture and the great books that are around. I went back and read my high school reading list a couple of years ago, a summer reading list. I have curiosity about how we communicate. I was always thirsty to engage in a conversation with somebody about something silly that we had in high school or something ridiculous that we read. It was natural for me to have the interest. And once you start doing something, I was intent upon finishing it. Just like the book I wrote, like business school. I didn't want to be known as a person who wouldn't complete things. So it was very natural for me to find, a way to complete, the things that I started.
Gotcha. You mentioned Jim Lonborg, one of the podcasters on this network just sent me an MP3. He did an interview with Jim Lonborg. He sent me this today. What a coincidence. And how names in baseball, his name is Bill Costadas, and I'm going to post the show later today, and I'll send you a link to it, and I find that coincidence right there to be unbelievable. I mean, real and cool, by the way. So, who was some
What a
of
great
the other...
pitcher, Jim. Let me just say a couple things about Jim Lonborg. First of all, when we played, Jim was as famous as you possibly can get. Everybody knew him facially. They knew his name. He's a beautiful guy, handsome, tall. He was an elegant, beautiful guy in the clubhouse, out of the clubhouse. He was sought after by media and everybody. He was just a great teammate. His wife, Rosie, so Jim and Rosie, I think he was done with baseball, but maybe he was close to the end, adopted two Korean boy and a girl, and later adopted a third baby. So they had three babies all adopted. And then she started to have babies. So she went on and had three more babies of her own naturally. So they had three adopted and three regular kids, all beautiful, all grown, delightful children.
I've heard of that happening quite often. It takes you adopt, and it takes a lot of the pressure off of folks tense up trying to be parents, trying to become parents. And once that happens, there's conception. So it's not unusual, but it's a beautiful story. People who wanted children enough to adopt. I found people who have been adopted that look at it as a blessing because they're wanted. No question. It's not just an accident. Somebody chose them. It's great. And I had a hand in fostering my son's brother, who his mom later adopted. He was our foster kid. And
wonderful.
so I know how that works, and I know that loving children doesn't have to be a biological thing. And as a matter of fact, sometimes it helps when it isn't a biological thing.
Children are a blessing.
Absolutely.
They are an absolute blessing. But you can imagine going to, dentist school 101 with 5 kids at home, and your wife Rosemary working as a waitress part time, so that you can go to med school. He did not get a scholarship to Tufts Dental. He made his own way, and he went and he cut no classes or corners in trying to get through med school. So the whole Jim Lonberg's has got a 2-part story. One's baseball, certainly great pitcher, and another one is what a great thing that he did, and was able to accomplish after his career was over.
Especially after going through the adversity that he did. I think if I'm remembering correctly, he was on the verge of superstardom, and he broke his leg skiing. Am I correct on that?
Yes. It was before he got married, and he had gone skiing with someone affiliated with a magazine that men used to like to look at. I know who it is, and I guess she was something to behold. I'm not sure how good a skier she was, but Jim hurt his leg trying to chase after.
Okay.
I think he was on the bunny hill.
We've all been hurt at one time or another chasing after him.
I think he was. You heard me correct. I think he was on the bunny hill.
So let's. How could we break that down and determine which magazine that was with all those innocuous clues? I'll let our listeners try to decide that one. But okay, here's what I want to talk to you about. You were teammates with both Nolan Ryan and Tom Seaver, and Tom Seaver was more of a mentor to you, if I'm putting it all together correctly. But nevertheless, you learned from both of them. What I'd like to know is, was there similarities? I mean, there's the bottom line of getting the ball over, or this, that, and the other thing. Are there incredible similarities to their style and or incredible differences to their style? Because we all know there's all kinds of ways of skinning a cat, and this wasn't, the question wasn't meant as a right or wrong question to their differences. I just want to know, because they both came up with the Mets in the minor leagues, I want to know if there was anything that was just that, similar or different, that stands out to you.
There was very little similarity between those two pitchers. Nolan Ryan was the best thrower of the baseball, the hardest thrower of the baseball, fastest, most feared pitcher that I've ever come in contact with. Back in the 70s, I played with him in 74, in California. It was at the height of his career. He just threw it harder than anybody else did. He was, a Texan, and he was a little bit bow-legged, and he was not mean, but he's a competitor. When he went to the mound, he didn't mind throwing behind you. He was just a guy that was intimidating. Throw at 100. We didn't have guns back then, but it was at least 100 miles an hour, long into his 40s. And he pitched a no-hitter, I believe, when he was 40 years old. Just a raw-boned competitor. Everybody was just itching to watch him pitch, just because of the sheer power that he generated using his legs the way he did, and grunting, as he threw it towards home plate.
Right.
It was a cross seam. It was a with the seam four-seamer fastball that he threw, and he had a curveball that was just rolled off the edge of the table. It was just amazing to watch him throw. Nobody felt safe. The umpire didn't feel safe. The catcher, the batter certainly. It was just something to behold. Seaver was a scientist. So Seaver was, I think, more of an artist, where Nolan Ryan was Hulk Hogan. Seaver was very much of a guy that studied and prepared and overworked the lesson plan. I mean, Seaver had books on hitters, and he would study the pitch counts where he'd got people out. We didn't have video. They didn't tape those games, so we didn't have the programs to go back and look at how his past performance was doing, or how the hitters had done that were coming to town. They did have advanced scouting, so we did know, that the hitters were coming were hitting well or weren't hitting well, what they had hit, but it wasn't a video kind of a thing.
Right.
When I got to the Mets, was more of a thrower. I was trying to throw it hard. I was trying to intimidate. I was trying to get guys out with one pitch. I once told Jerry Grote to tell the hitters what was coming, just so I could throw it by him. I was more throwing like Nolan Ryan. I wasn't anywhere near as fast as Nolan Ryan was, but I was trying to intimidate guys. That was my role, I felt, was to come in the 8th and 9th innings and throw hard and be nasty and throw harder than the guy that just left. So that was my self-adopted role. And Seaver refined that. Seaver helped me to breathe. He helped me to find an oasis in between innings. He helped to guide me into getting, 5 years in New York. If you're just a one-pitch wonder, you're not going to get 5 years as the closer in New York. You're going to pitch yourself out of a position. They're going to find that fastball someday. So Seaver was much more, as you said, a mentor for me, and helped me learn more about pitching and how to get guys out. And Nolan Ryan didn't keep a book on how to get the Tigers out or the Indians out. He was going to get them out Nolan Ryan's way. It was fastball, curveball, Katie by the door. If you got a whisper of a hit or you touched it during the game, you consider yourself lucky. He'd hit a caller, an 0 for 3 on batters just as easy as buttoning a tie. I mean, he was just awesome. Nolan was a guy that I loved to watch pitch. But Seaver was a guy that I liked to follow. I liked to emulate as much as I could and watch how he pitched the batters and how he set guys up and how far in he would go and how far out, and the symbiotic relationship with he and Grote when everything was going smooth. It was like watching a maestro pitch, watching Tom Seaver.
Now, as people, were they alike or different? Just as humans.
Yeah. Nolan Ryan.
Was Nolan a caring guy? Was Nolan a caring guy?
Oh yeah. He was a born again guy. He was lovely, prayerful, deeply religious and respectful. Just a wonderful guy right up until the time he put the uniform on. There was something about buttoning up that uniform that must have been like opening the cage of a bull in the china shop. I mean, this guy was frothing to go out there and attack. He was a gentleman, a Texan, very polite. Never heard him cuss. He was just like he had a switch. And once you turned the switch on, and you gave him a baseball in his hand, Yeah, he was something. He was just a guy that would do anything he could to get you out. It didn't mind throwing at you and intimidating you. It wasn't hit you over the head. I mean, he was a guy that really attacked the strike zone. Seaver was always very proud. I mean, Seaver was the poster boy for New York baseball for years. Literally on Sports Illustrated and everything, good looking, and but Seaver was.
Oh, had the wife Nancy was beautiful and charming,
as was Ruth Ryan. Tom had the lifestyle living in Greenwich, Connecticut, had the friends and all that goes with it. But I don't think he was a public person. I think he was private. His approach to baseball allowed his emotions to come in. I think Nolan would pitch on adrenaline, and I think Seaver pitched on his mental capacity. Both nice guys.
Both of them were nice guys. Okay, you wrote in with Seaver virtually every day, when he pitched, when he didn't pitch. Was there a big difference in riding in with him the day he was pitching? Did he get in that cocoon or shell or?
No, not until he got to the ballpark. Tom was light on his feet, lots of jokes, stories about golf, stories about his family. His father was a raisin grower out in California, and we had stories about his father and lots of funny stories about gardening. He had a couple dogs, and so it was nothing much about baseball until he got to Shea. He did drive too fast, but I think we had a license plate. We got there. But he was always light on his feet until he got to the ballpark. Once he got to the ballpark, he was committed to a process. He had something he was going to do. He was going to do it in his own time. He was preparing to pitch. So we didn't discuss pitching on the way in. And I never rode to the ballpark with Nolan, so I don't know what he was like before the game. But I know both of these guys, once they dressed out for the ball game, were such committed athletes. It gave me a sense of pride about the uniform I put on, to see how well they feel theirs out.
Nice. Let me ask you about the differences and the similarities of the two catchers that you primarily pitched to with the Mets, and that's Stearns and Grote. I'll ask you it to you in the same way I asked the question about Nolan and Tom.
Yeah, I got a chance. John Stearns was coming up. He was an All-American quarterback, I think Stanford. Carried himself that way, very prideful, statuesque, poised guy, in and out of uniform, handsome man. I threw better to Jerry Grote just because he was old school. Jerry was always dirty. He was a guy that would want to scuff the baseball if he could get away with it. He was always talking to the hitters. Jerry was very serious about the game of baseball, and he was good for me because I trusted him. So I trusted John Stearns, and I pitched to John a lot, but I had great games with Grote, and Jerry was a guy that I enjoyed. So what I enjoyed about Jerry is when he put down the pitch, I believed it and I threw it. I very, very rarely shook him off. And if you ever shake Jerry Grote off, you're going to get a fastball back about belt high that it's going to be tough for you to handle because he didn't like to get shaken off. And the second thing I liked about Jerry is the way he received the ball. I like a catcher to hold the target for me. Even when I'm winding up, I don't want him to drop the target or the glove. I want him to stay still, and I want him to frame it. And I don't mean by trying to pull a ball from out of the strike zone in. I think Jerry always framed the ball in the strike zone very well. And there was something about the way he caught it and how he received the baseball that made my pitches, and the glove would pop and you could hear it, and he took it in and sold it, to the umpire in such a way it was believable. I liked the way he moved behind home plate. It was very subtle. He would get down and get low. He was a guy that I thought was just a Hall of Fame catcher. Never got the publicity that he deserved. I just enjoyed. Jerry Grote was a professional catcher, and I loved the way he called the game and the way he received my pitches. Good guy.
Okay, I don't have anybody to compare Buddy Harrelson to, but he played behind you for the bulk of the time early on when you were there. What was he like? What an overachiever! He's couldn't have been more than 145 pounds.
Yeah, Jerry was. Harrelson was a guy that I got to know very well. We would shag down a beer after the ball game frequently. He loved Chinese food, so for some reason we would eat Chinese 2 or 3 nights a week when we were on the road. I love a guy that commanding infield, and Buddy took care of making sure guys were in play. He was a guy that knew the hitters so well, but it seemed like he got the ball so easily, and it's because he knew the guy had a tendency to pull, and nobody shifted back there. We always had the guys playing their position. I think the shift should be made illegal today. It's like zone defense in basketball. You should always play man-to-man, I think. But I liked Buddy. Buddy was, and he was a scrappy hitter. He made himself into a guy that could hit, enough to stay in the lineup. But I always felt great that he would, turn the double play in a fearless way. I mean, the second baseman is exposed. When you go to that bag and you hear somebody coming down your throat and you've got to turn and throw or jump, or what do you have to do? But he was always fearless in that way, and I thought he was a great fielder, especially to his glove hand. I don't think that he got balls going to his right as well as he got balls going to his left. And he used to I'd rather have him get the ball in between first and second for me than get a ball going up the middle, because I don't think you can always throw the guy out at first if the ball's going to go over second base bag. But I wanted to get that ball that was going between first and second if he could. And, Dustin Pedroia does that for the Red Sox. I thought that Buddy was just great at going to his glove hand when he was behind me. Anyway.
Okay. One final question I want to ask you about umpires in general, and were there some that were really good and others that, you say, how can these guys get contracts to come back year after year when they suck, for lack of a better word? Yeah. Who were the best and who were the worst?
I don't remember. I thought Nestor Shylock was a really good umpire. The umpires that I liked were guys that were consistent. If you're gonna pitch and you can get to a certain part of home plate and it's going to be a strike, I always felt like that was was important for the umpire. If you're going to get the low ball or the high pitch or the inside, I didn't care, but I just wanted you to be consistent with it. And I don't want to be given a pitch, but if I make a good pitch, I want to get the corner of the plate. And I felt like the umpires that would consistently do that for me were guys that I respected. Umpires back when I played had a rough life. They were not union. They weren't always making even the players' minimum. They traveled in small groups, had to make their own flights and own arrangements. It was a tough life. There was no pension for them in the early days. It was not a good thing to do. The old bubble protectors, if you remember, that the American League used,
right,
were tough to navigate.
So there was a definite difference in the high strike between leagues.
Yeah. I always felt like the umpires in the National League could get down because the inside protector, or they were on the inside corner usually between the catcher and the batter. I always thought that I could get a low strike in the National League, where a high strike was a more seeable pitch in the American League. And I wanted my ball to carry. I wanted to have it, start off on the low part of the plate and carry and have life and movement to it. So I appreciated the National League strike zone better.
But if I could sum it up, it is the key word is consistency. However they call it, you want to know that they're calling it not only for you, but for the other team the same way.
I watch the games now on TV, and it does seem to be inconsistency sometimes. And I think that umpires have trouble. I mean, an umpire can sneeze, an umpire can have something in their eye. And there's a lot of things that happen out there that would force a bad call or a bad pitch. I do like video replays for the bases. I hope it doesn't ever come to pitches at home plate. But I think for me, there was a difference between the two leagues, American and National League. And I pitched better in the National League than I did in the American League. That was my bias.
Statistically, certainly. And in key games, my God. Cool talking to you just as a Met fan, let alone as someone who respects you tremendously. As I've said, you're a three-sport athlete or a three-sport human being. You came up as a position player. You made the majors as a position player. You went to pitching, made the majors, and did very, very well in the majors. More importantly, your third career. You didn't stop. You could have just signed autographs for the rest of your life and made your money, made a small amount of insignificant contributions by doing that. And you took the high road and went with it. And I'm delighted. I'm delighted to have you on the network. How about that?
Thank you, Ralph. It's good. Your questions bring back a lot of memories, a lot of feelings, and I think in general we have a lot of fun on the air. I enjoy the half hour, 45 minutes we have together. Thank you.
As do I. So that's very high praise, Skip. I'm appreciative, and I want you to have a good time at the Hall of Fame and a safe trip.
I'll report back and tell you how it goes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Not next Monday, but the Monday after that, we'll talk and go from there.
Thank you. We will.
Be well, my friend.
I will.
All right.
Same to you.
Thank you for listening, everybody. Ralph Tyko, the weak link of it all, talking to Skip Lockwood, Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. The show is Insight Pitch. Thanks again, Skip. Adios, everybody.
Thank you. Take care. Good night.
Bye.